Welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses, the podcast where we go beyond the bios, beyond the titles, and we explore the lessons that have shaped today's most influential leaders, all through the songs that have moved them. Each week, we build the playlist of a leader's life. 5 songs, 5 lessons, 1 unforgettable playlist.
No boxes, just verses. We're not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. Our stories out loud. No boxes, just verses. Watch wisdom astound. The stories of how we found our way. Stories of how we learned to pray. Our stories, our stories, our stories out loud. Our wisdom, our pearls. Everyone say wow, 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 wow. Woo, no boxes, just verses. Feel it move.
And today, I'm so excited to be talking to one of my dear friends in Silicon Valley, Ahmad Thomas. Ahmad, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. It's great to see you. Honored to be on the podcast and look forward to a great conversation.
Oh, we are going to have a lot of fun. Our listeners don't know. I already have a little preview of your musical list, and it is I'm doing fire emojis right now.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a diverse set of tastes, and hopefully there'll be others out there that relate. But what you're doing, a podcast that's really about joy and teaching people and sharing their journeys through music, it's amazing. So I really do mean it. I'm honored to be here for the conversation today.
Well, thank you. Well, look, before we get into your journey, let's get into your bio real quick. For those of you who don't know, Ahmad Thomas is the CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, one of the nation's most dynamic business associations representing the global technology companies powering the innovation economy. And just so our listeners really understand the magnitude, some of the most powerful, influential CEOs, especially those in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, are a member of your association. So truly, you are sitting at the epicenter of what is shaping our world. And that's how I got to meet you at one of your convenings many, many years ago. And you were so gracious and have become a friend since then. So I thank you for all the work that you're doing. So in addition to your work at SVLG, you have catalyzed industry-leading initiatives to harness the power and the potential of emerging technologies such as, obviously, AI, founding the Institute of California AI Policy to help shape the regulatory posture needed to support its rapid development and deployment. Ahmad has also focused efforts with global technology brands to help operationalize change and to reinvigorate STEAM talent pipelines. And boy, do we need that. Ahmad is a former investment banker and senior congressional aide. You bring many years of experience, over 20 years, if you will, of working in and on behalf of businesses, social enterprises, and government, where Ahmad has honed a deep understanding of public-private partnerships and the intersections of commerce, public policy, and technology that drive Silicon Valley's innovation infrastructure. Ahmad serves on several boards aligned with his passions for technology, sports, and advancing opportunity. He is a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations, an American Leadership Forum Senior Fellow. Shout out to ALF. I'm also an ALF Senior Fellow. You are a Business Journal Power 100, recognizing the most influential people working in Silicon Valley. Ahmad has earned his bachelor's from Cornell University, a master's degree from the London School of Economics, and an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Ahmad, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. Thank you. I know there's a lot there. I hope I can live up to it.
Oh, you beyond live up to it, but I know you personally. So look, but we're going to go all the way back to a young Ahmad. Where's he growing up? The song that you pick is Promised Land by Chuck Berry, and that is an old school song. But I want to know where you're growing up, what are you doing, what are you dreaming of, and why that song?
Well, maybe 2 or 3 things here at the top. But to answer your question, I'm a Californian born and raised, military family. Dad was last stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I grew up on the Central Coast. For me, I love the format and the theme of your show, especially where you're looking at music and learning through music and shared experience. And so for me, these songs speak to a period in my life, not specifically a song tied to an event, but it's to a period or a theme. And I guess the last thing I would say, I've been very, very fortunate to see incredible live music as a young child to being older. So I've seen Chuck Berry in concert, Ray Charles, George Clinton and P-Funk, The Roots, Outkast, Tribe Called Quest, Stan Getz. I've been fortunate to really either tag along with my parents or see some great shows. So Chuck Berry is the greatest live music experience that I've ever had. I had a chance to see him. He was playing a blues set live at the Fillmore. Blues album is one of my favorite albums out there. But just musically, it was incredible to see a legend like that just go and go. He played blues stuff. He played all of his greatest hits until they dragged him off the stage. But on a deeper level, my dad is from rural Alabama. My family's from the deep South, where we've been since the end of the Civil War. I had relatives who fought in the Civil War. And my mom's West Indian. She's a Caribbean Islander from Trinidad and Tobago. And that song, Promised Land from Chuck Berry, speaks to a story of someone through the time of segregation making their way from Norfolk, Virginia to California, which is the Promised Land. And, Elvis probably has done the most famous iteration of it outside of Chuck Berry. A lot of people have done that song. But the meaning behind it is quite heavy. And he talks about making it through Mississippi clean, right, which is code for getting through places like that where things were pretty difficult, certainly in the 1950s, getting through it in one piece. So I picked that song because when you talk about American icons and originals, and we talk about music and soul and R&B and blues and rock and roll, you really need to have Chuck Berry as part of that conversation. You look at the Beatles, you look at where so much of modern rock and roll comes from. I would argue that he's a genesis for a lot of that. But the story is a heavy one, and I think it speaks to my mother as an immigrant and my father and my family's story. Promised Land, California, which is the Promised Land, right? I'm here in the middle of Silicon Valley at our office, but there's no place like it.
And you grow, like you said, your parents come from these different beginnings. They get to the quote unquote Promised Land to build a better life for their family. And you wind up growing up in California. So take us through kind of what that was like. At this point, you're not growing up in segregated Alabama. What is that like at that time growing up as a young boy in California?
Yeah, it's very interesting because in that period, you had defense in particular. If you looked at Vandenberg, the Lompoc Valley where I lived, or broader Central Coast, was a pretty significant part of the economy, right? And now when I go back home, that Central Coast region is much more, call it agriculture or wine or tourism. A lot of that economic activity has died off. So it's a very interesting transition if you look over the past 40 years at that particular region. But I grew up in a military family. And so for me, a lot of my exposure early days was shopping on base or spending a lot of time with military personnel. I loved to play golf. Where I played most of my golf was a course called Marshalia Ranch, which was an Air Force course that's now closed, but out playing with a lot of vets. My dad's a Vietnam vet, spent a lot of time with Vietnam vets there. And I think when you grow up in more of a small town environment, those values really do stick with you. The values of service. It hits very close to home for you, I know, with Bill. But our military really don't get enough credit. And the military families and the military spouses, and even today, I'm home with my family over Christmas, and it's never forgotten that there's service members who aren't home. And I think sometimes it's tough. I could never even pretend to have put out the sacrifice of my father or others that have served, but coming from a military family, I think I at least have a little bit of an understanding of what people go through and what people sacrifice. So for me, that was a huge part of, I think, my value system and who I am growing up in a military community. I would say that where that carries over, or I hope it carries over, perhaps is with a certain level of discipline and possibly most importantly, a need or feeling, a desire to give back in some way, shape, or form. This idea that you have a certain set of gifts, a certain set of lived experience that's unique, how can you better the human condition, right? How can you take what you've got to make the world a better place? And it's, again, something that's very personal when I share a little bit just at a high level there about my family experience. Coming from rural Alabama, in the 1940s and 1950s, there's a lot of distance traveled, maybe is the right word. And that's never forgotten for me. And again, it's about how you leave your mark and drive positive impact.
I can just hear it resonating through your voice and your words. Certainly, I identify with being a military family. My spouse was in the Navy, but I want to actually give a shout out to my assistant, Chrissy Metcalf, who is a military spouse right now. Her husband is serving. I want to thank him and her for their service. And I want to really thank all my listeners, right? Shout out to them, all my listeners who are serving our country. I want to thank you and your families for what you sacrifice, because I agree with you. They don't get enough credit for what they do for this country. And so you growing up in that backdrop, growing up with people who are serving our country, you learn a lot of discipline, and you learn to be very focused, and you learn what's important, and you learn about sacrifice, and and to not take a lot of things for granted, because in a household like that, somebody may not be coming home for years, or they may only come home once and then you don't see them anymore, or they may not come home at all. And that's a reality of how you're growing up. And I know that had to shape you tremendously. So what are you actually dreaming of, even what you want to do with your life at that time?
I think in terms of being molded and shaped, it's this idea, if I'm really reflecting, this idea of a chain of service, right? We actually, as I mentioned, we can go back to the Civil War and find relatives that served our country. And for me, this idea that I hope is core to who I am and who I hope and believe my kids will be, but this idea that I may not be giving back, serving the way other members of my family have done, but what can I do to have a positive impact? And I think about, my first roles and the roles that truly set my professional life trajectory. They were public service roles, in particular working on Capitol Hill. So for me, Californian born and raised, and I was fortunate that my dad had retired, and, my life was within a 2-mile radius until I went off to college. I went off to school on the East Coast, and I lived in DC as well. But those values always stuck with me. And I think it's also very interesting that we're in a time where that type of integrity in teaching those lessons, I reflect on it a lot, having children. I think it's more important than ever. So I consider myself very fortunate. That the point isn't so much about having tremendous economic opportunity. I don't have a hard Scrabble story in any way, but it was about being taught to believe in myself from a very young age. I got a West Indian mother, I've always, in my aunties, I've always had folks on me, which I think is very good. And then beyond that, really seeing the discipline and the impact and the service up close, all of that molded me, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I think it did. And so you decide to leave California to go to college. And by the way, I have a lot of understanding of the community you kind of grew up in, both military, both the family from down south. And so there was probably no question that you were going to go to college. Like, that wasn't like a maybe he's going to go to college. It was like, where are you going?
Maybe the earliest questions were, if military was going to be a path. But I was never really encouraged to go that route. And it was also a very different time in the world, as you're looking at late 80s or early 90s, pre 9/11 and otherwise. That was probably the initial question. And then for me, going off to college was also an experience that was very eye-opening for me. Being a Californian, born and raised, and spending the majority of my life there, my time at Cornell was eye-opening in very good ways. And it starts to build this idea of widening your aperture in terms of opportunities and what's possible. If we look back at my focus, it is interesting that the focus was always on something service-oriented, on something, not to get too meta, but almost a higher purpose or a calling, right? If you have a set of skills and you look at the distance that those around you have traveled, you kind of, in some ways, don't have a choice but to figure out how you can give back a little bit for what you've been given. And I don't know if that resonates with any listeners or with you, Shannon, but with me, it was always an idea that you would do something to serve in some way, shape, or form. And you would do it well, and your financial rewards or your rewards in life would naturally follow. But answering that call, for lack of a better word, and doing it well would open doors and opportunities. I knew I wanted to do something from a young age that had an impact around policy. And in many respects, I was very, very lucky. I actually started with an internship out of grad school on Capitol Hill, but I had a chance to work for literally my political idol, which again opened so many doors for me and was such an incredible learning experience.
Well, before we get to that, let's get you to Cornell. The song that you pick is Only You by 112. You don't even know this, but that's one of my favorite songs. I love that song. I actually know all words to the song, like every single word. If I could sing, I would sing it, but I can't, so I'm going to spare our listeners. So I want to know the why, but I want to get you to Cornell because here's the reality. You know, you're a California kid. Cornell is, it's cold there. Okay? It's just cold. So did you visit or just didn't know it was cold or didn't care? But how do you get there? And then it's one of the best things that ever happened in your life because I happen to know your story. So please share that too.
Well, I visited in, I think it was April, and it was very cold in April, which should have been kind of a warning sign. But, I looked at Ivy League schools. I was very interested in a business-specific program. And Cornell was also the only school that kind of provided that avenue and optionality. As I shared a wonderful experience, the song Only You by 112, that's really about my wife. We met in college. That's a song that we really liked. And the most important thing in my life, or to come out of my life when you look at my college experience, but my, post family existence as an adult, is finding your life partner and building a family and everything that comes with that. So it's a very special experience for me. We're both Californians and fortunate to meet at a young age out on the East Coast. And, part of my songs, again, for the 20th time, I'm in California. You think DJ Quick and Tupac and Ice Cube and West Side National. A lot of that is
Snoop Dogg,
Dave and Snoop. The songs I'm picking are a little bit more work appropriate songs, but Only You and 112, that's about her. And even the lyrics speak to a very enduring and deep love and connection.
I need to know where we stand about this special thing called love. I know I do. What about you? I just need you in my life. I told y'all I know the words of the song. Yeah. In my head, because I do know your lovely wife, in my head, I have this music video of like her walking down the campus and you seeing her and being like shocked. And then the music comes on and then you're like, and then you guys start, talking and dating. And then the Only You part comes in. That's what I have made up as what happened.
Yeah, there's some of that. I met her and it turned out that I had a class with one of her friends who lived on her floor. And through that initial conversation, led to the conversation with my, I guess, then girlfriend and then ultimately wife. But as you say, when you look back, I certainly consider myself very, very fortunate to find an incredible life partner, to do so at a young age. And that's what that song is about. And even today, we hear that song. You don't hear it as much. I always smile if I hear that song.
I bet it's the song that tells a whole story that changes your life, right? Finding a life partner at that point changes your life.
Yeah, that begins to really then impact my life choices coming out of school. And for my wife, she was pre-med and always on a medical track. So, where she ended up graduating from med school and her time was DC, because I was working in DC, and we also coordinated our lives around our move back home to California. But maybe another thought for listeners, actually in a college class I had, it was a business law class. The professor on our first day sat us all down and he said, I'm going to talk to you all about a lot of things. But if there's one thing you remember from a life, wellness, happiness, and legal and business standpoint, please remember the most important decision you'll ever make is the person that you marry. And don't get that wrong. Shout out Professor Klausner if he's still out there teaching. But that really connected with me. To hear that and to hear that laid out at the beginning of this business law class that we were doing, I was fortunate to really find a good, compatible, wonderful, high values, credible partner.
That's interesting that the business law professor said that. When I was in law school, I was a TA for the business law class. We certainly did not say that. We probably should have, because it's true. Putting my legal hat on, it's extremely true. For sure. There's a famous blues song called It's Cheaper to Keep Her. And that song means kind of like it's very important to be right about this, these choices of whoever your partner is, because, you know, it's cheaper to keep them.
Yeah, the theme that comes out of that on this idea of being fortunate is at a young age, you not only have a soulmate, but you have that professional partner. It's actually kind of unique. We keep our professional lives very distinct, and we do that to this day. And her work has patient confidentiality and other things involved. So I never know details of what she's doing, and she never knows details of what I'm doing. But in terms of how we approach leadership, how we approach big life and personal decisions, to have that partner here for so many years, it has been a true blessing.
And I think there's studies, you know, I'm no expert at this, but so don't quote me, but I do think there's studies that talk about from lots of markers, from markers of happiness, markers of wealth, markers of health, that having that partner and that long-term relationship, those people tend to fare better on all of those markers.
Yeah, I think family and those relationships. And when I look back, and thankfully today still am able to reflect, having wonderful family, parents, extended family, you know, my parents in particular, and my aunts, and then having a very supportive partner, those are pretty important things. And when you can get those things right, essentially you're thinking of that foundation that you build upon. I've been so lucky that that stuff has been right for a very long time. And that takes out, I don't know what the percentage might be, but it takes out a good percentage of where challenges might come, right? And allows you to take that energy to tackle the big stuff you've got to tackle.
You guys leave Cornell and you make it to DC, and it sounds like you get to DC because of the opportunities that you have, and then she winds up getting a great opportunity to continue her studies in med school and all that type of stuff in DC. You've already talked about the fact that service is very important to you. Tell me kind of how the opportunity to work on Capitol Hill came about. The song that you pick for these kind of DC years, which are very foundational, kind of like early career moves for you, and just in shaping, I think, a lot of things that you're working on even today. You picked Funky President by James Brown, which I had to go listen to. I know a lot of James Brown songs, but I wasn't familiar with that.
So that's another song that has many meanings attached to it. I'm glad to cover them. And, you know, there's one side of it, which is I wanted to get James Brown in the playlist. And that's a call out to some of my family members, but a call out to me that good music's got to have soul in some way, shape, or form. And you can have a great violinist, or I'm on a symphony board. You know, you can have great classical music with soul, and then you can have James Brown with soul. But to me, music's got to have some soul and speak to me. There's also a time there that I'm in DC when President Obama comes into office. And that is a time of tremendous optimism for the country, and a time of a very real change for our nation. That's a call out to being in DC with that new president coming in, being part of that first inauguration. I don't know if I've ever been around that many people in my life to this day. It was a pretty incredible thing. And today, it's a very exciting time around AI and technology and otherwise. They're just different eras that people are a part of. But also, there's a piece to that song. It's not a happy song. It's a song that speaks to struggle. It's a song that speaks to people being forgotten and policies that aren't helping the people that need to be helped. And my view has always been that it's good business to be a good community partner. It's good policy. It's good for our country to have opportunities for those from marginalized backgrounds and otherwise. It makes our economy better and more competitive. And so that's a reference, and why that song I think is interesting is that double or triple meaning. And I think that the literal term funky at the time in the 70s when James Brown wrote it, as I understand it, it's not a complimentary song. But I like the song, and it just speaks to where I was orienting myself, the lessons that I was learning, what was happening in the country at that time. But for me, the guiding star professionally, the guiding mentor in my life, it was Senator Feinstein, Dianne Feinstein, our longest serving California senator. And working for her for 6 years was transformative. 6 years is actually a pretty long clip on the Hill. And I was there through the financial crisis where I was the lead staffer on the economic policy and the financial issues. But it's from learning how to present to a CEO or executive, to learning how to comport oneself, to even how you handle disappointments and failure, how you prepare, being able to see one of the best in the country at this stuff up close, being able to see how someone like that prepares to go on CNN, or, I've been at the White House with her making presentations and otherwise. It's tough to describe the value that has for someone. And as I've thought about it, even thinking a little bit for this conversation, for those of us that might be the only one in the room, those experiences shape you in such a way from an authentic, confident standpoint, all the way to really knowing what you're doing and talking about, that they're invaluable. So that was the turning point, I would say, for me professionally. And it was not just the exposure and the pressure, but it was the teaching and being able to learn from someone as high integrity, kind, and full of grace as she was.
Ma, this is so fascinating. Can you tell us a little more about, how do you get a role like that on Capitol Hill? And what is that like?
Yeah. So again, back to values and how you approach things based off of life lessons. One of the values that comes out of this, or qualities, is thinking long-term or making long-term investments. So I actually took an unpaid role as an intern. I was fresh out of grad school. I had come from the London School of Economics. I went to Wharton later. My first degree was public policy, philosophy and public policy. But I was looking at some consulting jobs that were the highest paycheck I'd ever seen in my life. And, some things that look very appealing. And I sought counsel from people that I really trusted. And I also thought about calling what I wanted to do, where I could have an impact. And I thought, and the counsel I received was, look, worst case, you can go take an internship for a few months and you will have had an opportunity to at least be in the presence of someone like this. But if you get there and do well, things happen quickly in these offices, and you might be able to have opportunities come your way that could be life-changing. So you could go one route, which is you become a management consultant and you go off to business school and you do things kind of as they're planned out by your career advisor. Or if you're really serious about maybe having the opportunity to be all you can possibly be, why don't you go take that unpaid role, lean into it to the greatest extent you can. I wasn't exactly living high on the hog at the time, but I had the wherewithal, which I'm grateful for, to go a few months there with no income. We made it work. And it was just so rewarding getting to know her, being able to build that relationship. The first role that I was given was called a legislative correspondent, So you write letters and you write memos, you write. And I was able to learn about certain policy issues. And then the person that ran all of the economic policy work, I'll say her name. Shout out Amanda Renteria. Amanda's incredible. She ran Hillary Clinton's campaign, and she's since gone on to be a pretty prominent CEO in her own right. And Amanda had come out of Harvard Business School. She had been a great athlete at Stanford, and she'd been at Goldman. So that's kind of the standard for these roles. And she left to become a chief of staff to another senator, an incredible opportunity for her. And I was the person who was able to step in, initially filling in and getting that work done, but then getting some bills passed, earning some trust, and really having quite an opportunity. It's very, very hard to show up for jobs like that and be hired at a level that's commensurate with your experience or what you deserve. The reality is, for jobs like that, and I still believe it's the case, you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves. You have to be willing to take a certain element of risk or calculated risk. And I don't know if I've ever been hungrier before in my life. And sometimes I try to bring that back. But when you're there as an unpaid intern trying to find that opportunity, you hustle. And I really did hustle. It was well worth it.
We've talked a lot about that in my first season, and even now so much in my second season, that so many great leaders, when they talk about their careers, again, this is no boxes. They don't just continue to go up in this kind of straight line. There's lots of ebbs, flows. Sometimes the line's going down and it sounds like you're going 15 steps backwards just to get ahead. And this is just another example of, hey, you've said this several times. You knew you wanted to do some type of service to this country. You just innately, this is who you are. So you knew you wanted to do that. How you were going to do that obviously had to figure out your way, but you had to be willing to take this unpaid internship, which maybe couldn't have worked out, right? But you believed in yourself, and then you said you got there and you just worked really hard, and then it turned into this, and it turned into this. And I dare say that those were the stepping stones you needed, because you do eventually kind of go back into, you do some iBanking and things of that nature. So that's kind of the traditional role people do after different grad schools. You do a little bit of that, but this experience right here, I've heard you talk about it before in other forums. I dare say it was probably one of the most transformational things that ever happened to you. And you started with not getting paid.
Well, this is the formative professional experience of my life. Even when we look at banking or at Wharton, that skill set, that professional skill set comes from this role. And the song that I pick, which is Mighty Sparrow, Gene and Dinah, that's also a song with a lot of meaning to it, but I will keep it really high level. Mighty Sparrow might be the most famous singer from Trinidad and Tobago, as I mentioned, where my mother's from, my mother's family in the West Indies. That's probably his most famous song. It's a hilarious song. It's a real satire, but heavy political satire. So that kind of growing up, being pushed hard in a loving way around expectations, that was a differentiator for me in DC, because everyone's working hard. And there was a story that I will always find funny. One of my first assignments there really didn't go well at all. And, the senator made it very clear that the product that I put together, that I worked really, really hard on, really didn't meet expectations. There was quite a gap. And so I got the feedback and I was like, boy, well, she clearly didn't like the speech that I wrote. I went back up to my desk and rewrote it with all the notes that I was given and brought it back down. And the feedback that I got was, wow, you went back and you just did this? I was like, what? Yeah. And I guess some of that was atypical, but coming from the environment that I came from and the lived experience, a rough conversation from, let's say, from a mother or an aunt or a family member was something that was not, I guess it had happened so many times. Yeah, I just kind of didn't even flinch. But that's where you begin to get a sense of, where does your lived experience put you in positions where you might be able to differentiate yourself?
I grew up from parents who are from, raised in the Midwest, but their parents are from the South. So very Southern upbringing. And absolutely, by the time I was 18, thick skin, I'll put it to you that way. Very, I'll be appropriate for the podcast. Very thick skin, because otherwise, I don't know how people crumble by just words. That seemed like the easiest thing is somebody just use some words to say something to me. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I should be clear here on the podcast. I'm not advocating this. This is kind of old school
Me either.
stuff.
But that's how it was.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
that's certainly the way that I came up, which really helped me a lot. One of the challenges we think about now, my wife and I, is not really having that with our kids. How can you still imbue that same sense of urgency? How can you still kind of drive outcomes?
Do you have an answer to that one? I'm
We
looking for a
don't, we don't
solution.
have a great answer. We try to look at incentives and disincentives. Charlie Munger's written some great papers about that, but essentially aligning expected or wanted behaviors with the right incentives. And that seems to work so long as it's very clearly communicated. All a work in progress.
I would definitely tell you, my father, rest in peace. I remember when we were first disciplining my older son, and I put him in a timeout, and my father was just cracking up. And I was like, what's so funny? He was like, does that really work? You just told him to go look at the wall in the corner and that worked? He was like,
yeah.
What parenting is this?
Yeah. No, we're talking about a pre-timeout world.
Yeah.
But,
But anyway,
you're in positions that bring that much pressure. And any role you're in can have pressure, right? It's all about how you perceive it. You could be doing something that we may view as very low risk, but it might feel like a very high pressure situation for you. The thing about, I talk about the Hill, I talk about military, and I talk about startup environments. Those are three places where the pressure is very, very real. If you have to go to the White House in 3 hours to make a presentation, or if your boss is going on CNN in 25 minutes and you've got to get some talking points and do a briefing, or you have a vote that came out of nowhere and you're in a busy, crowded elevator and you have to brief someone on this, and you have media and you have other things, and you got 30 seconds to explain a 300-page bill, that's real pressure. And on this theme of how you differentiate yourself in ways that accrue to more benefits down the line, it's the reps, but it's also understanding where your skill set can best add value, right? So I was able to build a level of trust on certain things where I could just say, hey, I really think you need to vote no for these two reasons. And that might be enough, but that took some time, and it really took that work in earning the trust.
And as you shared with the listeners early on, it wasn't like this was instant success, right? Like you said, one of the first things you worked on was completely a bomb, and you had to just pick yourself back up again and try again, basically. And you got better.
Yeah. I personally don't think that they're particularly deep learnings in what I have to share. There's been a certain sense of determination that I've had, a certain sense of belief. I think it's very important that that belief has to be authentic. It's something you just can't fake. When you're in that room with CEO X or President Y or whatever it is, you've either have a belief in what you're talking about or your ability to convey what you're trying to convey, or you don't. And I think that it's rep after rep after rep after rep that gets you there, right? And I've been fortunate to get a lot of those reps. And then it really becomes listening, taking wise counsel. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by love and people who care about me, and values and integrity and service that have made me into, I hope, a productive contributor to society. I can't pick up the phone and call Uncle Bob, who sat on 5 corporate boards, and get a recommendation or otherwise. But I do have a lot of people in my network that can help me. The question is, do you really listen with an open mind and an open heart? And I did that from an early age, taking this internship, even transitioning from the Hill to investment banking. Some of that for me was, where are you now going? And it was a life-driven move with my wife and her medical residency and training. So the questions become, are you going to continue on this path that you're doing, which is around policy and relationships and otherwise? Or, is there an opportunity to really triple down on an additional set of skills to add to what you've built here, right? And it was actually Senator Feinstein's husband, Dick Blum, who was a very accomplished private equity leader, incredible resource. I was so fortunate to benefit from his expertise, someone who really counseled me on what my next steps would look like. So that's where you get the banking, you get the business school, but you also get many of the deals that I did had a social component. We can talk about that. But the deal that I did that was probably the most fun and certainly the most acclaimed deal that I was a part of or led. It wasn't the big deal. It was a social impact deal. That was the first ever social bond in this market sector.
You leave the Hill, you go to grad school, you get an MBA, you go work as an investment banker, but you still at your core still have that service and giving back element and social entrepreneurship, like all that type of stuff is still very core to you. So if you could share a little bit more about how were you able to weave that into like a very, what I would call corporate box type of career move to add a little bit of flavor to that?
Yeah, and a lot of that also, the career decisions, it's opportunity and fortunate to have great opportunities. But also, as I shared, following the guidance of those people that had been there and those trusted mentors. And when you think about these really large corporations, they can also imbue very unique, powerful sets of skills. So when you have someone that's able to thrive in a large corporate structure or large corporate setting, when you have someone that's able to thrive in a Capitol Hill office, then you combine that with some of the educational pieces, you really are starting to build a complete athlete. To me, certainly the guidance I received, but what I also knew was missing was the quant skills and really building that up to a level where it was pretty bulletproof. I think having, I would say, for lack of a better word, and it's really not the most appropriate term for this because you can get business acumen in many ways, but the business acumen you get as an investment banker or operating at those levels at a bulge bracket, these are what I like to call, when I do career talks, passport stamps, right? And some of us need more passport stamps than others. But when you can point to the check boxes education-wise, the check boxes with the different forms of work experience, then the ability to translate some of those things into actionable results or impact, that's when you start to build a set of experiences that I think begin to be more compelling. So for me, banking helped orient my thinking much more around value proposition. And I do know that that sounds a little bit cliche, but it's not. Everything I do in my role today is value proposition. What am I doing that adds unique value versus a competitor? What am I doing that would make an elected official believe we would be the right partner to accomplish XYZ, right? What am I doing that makes a CEO believe it's worth her time to allocate 30 minutes to be part of what we're doing, right? Everything is about how you differentiate yourself. And being in a setting where you develop a structure for how you communicate that, and granted it's through pitch decks, but still, that was very helpful in orienting my mindset.
I completely agree. All of these organizations, I've talked about it a couple times in the show, even in my own background with working at big law firms, et cetera. They bring you in, their training is amazing. And I don't just mean the training, like the technical training. I mean the training in how to operate in a corporate environment is kind of unmatched. Like, because you're not going to learn that in school. But these big companies, these big firms, they're really good at it. So you get that right training. You graduate, you go into banking, you get back to California finally as a banker. So kind of walk us through those days coming back to California, and how does that get you to eventually you become the CEO of Silicon Valley Leadership Group? And I want to understand how you get there before we kind of go into where you are today as a very powerful leader in our community.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Shannon. Yeah, I spent over a decade as an investment banker. I was very fortunate to be on an incredible team, still have so many great friends today. And I was on the West Coast in San Francisco for that entire time. And some of the deals that I worked on, which is why I really loved what I had an opportunity to do, had social impact elements. I did some real estate and real property deals. I was able to do government deals and lead our California government banking or municipal banking. And I was able to also, within the firm, I was at Barclays, to sit on our board that controls social impact investments for the firm, along with the CEO and the head of the investment bank and certain executives. So it's some of those opportunities that I was able to carve out that really opened up doors for me. But I guess it's a consistent theme. I was fortunate. I was on a great team. I talked to a lot of people before I joined that team to make sure that it would be a good fit, that it would be a good experience for me. And it all was very true. Now, when I went into banking, I was told by people about what a change it would be, pressure-wise, work-wise. But what was interesting, while all of that was very true, it was very much in line with the pace of Capitol Hill, right? So I felt that I was quite conditioned. In fact, even more so, because the difference here was you had a team, I had a very collegial team in DC, but there was an element of pressure that you really couldn't replicate in settings like this. So when you go to a large investment bank and you take off some of those external pressure cooker factors and combine it with a very supportive team and a great boss and a great situation, it was actually a wonderful experience that I had. And I had no kind of thoughts or inklings, even after 10 years of leaving. I was fortunate to see opportunities and the upward mobility throughout that time. When the recruiters reached out to me about this role, this was in the middle of 2020 and in COVID. We have George Floyd. We have a lot of reflection going on for a lot of us. To have an opportunity to lead a storied organization like this was just an opportunity that's too good to pass up.
I dare say it was like your whole life had been leading to something like this.
Some of the conversations that we had of how you differentiate yourself as a professional allowed me, and I think part of the reason why that outreach came was to be able to speak with credibility from the business side, speak with credibility from the policy side and having some real policy chops and understanding, and to be able to combine that when you look at your lived experience and how you might be able to relate to people, you get an ability to, again, hopefully drive something pretty positive.
Well, the song for this kind of stage of your life as a CEO of Silicon Valley Leadership Group is Roller Skates by Still Pulse. And I'd love for you to explain that one and also really explain for our listeners some of the innovative things that Silicon Valley Leadership Group is working on and how they can better understand just the impact that you all are having, not only just on our community here, but on the world.
Yeah, so I should start with Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and it all comes from having an incredible team. And we have just world-class team members, well beyond me, that have deep policy expertise, deep knowledge in everything that they do, and they make us what we are today, along with obviously our members. But you go back 5 decades to our founding by David Packard of HP, and he created a group of the business leaders and leading companies in Silicon Valley to make this valley all that it could be, to drive public-private partnerships, to think about education and infrastructure and investment, to make this region the most competitive region on the planet. And you fast forward to today, when you look at AI, when you look at the pace of change in transportation, when you look at the new economy, when you look at future-ready workforce, Silicon Valley is at the epicenter of the next iteration of not just our economy, but of our society and of our lives. And to be leading the leading business group for the leading companies in the leading and most productive economic region on planet Earth, I say I'm very, very fortunate. We have an incredible board, an incredible team, and where we engage around the core policy issues that help lay a foundation for innovation to take place in California and in Silicon Valley in particular. We have great convenings and events where we bring world-class speakers to talk to members and others, and you've been one of those speakers. And then we have our advocacy work, which is pretty serious work. Right now, that is zeroed in on Sacramento for state of California, and then primarily some of the work in the region. But we really try to ensure that our businesses, our leading employers, are helping make our state in this region all it can possibly be. And I should add, as a caveat, in a time where global competition, in a time where the global AI race is peaking, right? So what we do over the next 5 years, the decisions we make, the leaders in our government make, the policies that are set forth here are going to shape that next generation of technology leadership. And we want to ensure that that leadership emanates from right here where I am in Silicon Valley. So the work I do combines the business, combines the policy, the connectivity that I've been fortunate to have, all into driving those outcomes for our leaders in the Valley.
And definitely talk to us about what's next. What are the biggest initiatives you guys are working on right now? And I'm not going to let you forget, I need to know about roller skates.
Well, AI is at the heart and center of what our core initiatives are driving. We want to see AI be rapidly deployed. We want to see AI move forward in a way that opens opportunities for all. So we've done first of their kind pilot programs with community colleges. Foothill De Anza Community College District would be the most notable, where we developed in partnership with them machine learning and AI curriculum, where anyone can take classes and upskill and find opportunities to participate in this new AI economy. We're very engaged around the future-ready workforce issues. But to answer the question at a higher level, we've gone out and created an institute, ICAP, the Institute for California AI Policy, that is laser focused on AI policy, education, opportunity in California. We hired an executive from PayPal, Ziyong David Fan is his name, and Ziyong is incredible. He started a couple months ago, and we've really built an incredible team focused on AI. So I would say that the work that we're doing that is laying the contours of what AI will look like in California, and by extension, I believe the country and the world, is pretty exciting stuff. And the timing of all of this, things are moving at such a rapid pace. I think that the responsibility we have as business leaders is perhaps higher than ever before to really have productive, trust-built relationships with key leaders in the public sector.
And roller skating.
All right. It is funny because these songs that I picked, I gave the disclaimer I wanted to say for work songs, but these songs have a lot of meanings, and I might get this wrong. There might be West Indians out there or Jamaicans that can share more, because Steel Pulse was a band that was really leading edge in terms of a lot of political ideas. I think there are even college classes where Steel Pulse is taught or some of their work is mentioned. But that song, Roller Skates, one, is a very happy song. It's a happy reggae song. That song puts a smile on my face. But it's about power. It's about ensuring that when you're in power, you're thinking about the impacts of your decisions on everyone. And I'm giving a bit of a PG rendition, but the fact that it's a great song, the fact that it's great reggae and just brings the vibes, if it's raining or something like that, and you play that song, it'll just lift you up. And the fact that it has a message that, hey, if you are fortunate to be in a role that has influence in any way, shape, or form, think about the values, the integrity, the people that have come before you, what you represent, and don't ever forget that. That's actually quite important. And not a day goes by where I'm not reminded of those lessons, if it's literally not by my parents or my wife or being a parent myself. But I think that that's very, very important.
I think that's a great way to sum up where you are today, what you're working on today, and the perfect song. So thank you for sharing the why for that. Listen, we got to get out of here. But before we go, I want to know, how can we support you? What are you personally working? Like, what are the things you're working on that the listeners can be supportive of? How can we find you? Like, what are your handles? How do you like to be followed on social media? And I need another song that makes you happy. Like, we already know the Still Pulse song makes you happy, but you gotta give me one more.
All right, I guess we'll go backwards. The happy stuff would be Bad Bunny. We're playing a lot of Bad Bunny in our house right now. My wife loves Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny is the halftime performer for the Super Bowl. We're recording this before the Super Bowl. But I would say literally anything from Bad Bunny in terms of the happiness. For me personally, engaging with SVLG, engaging with our Institute for California AI Policy. If you have any interest in AI, or if you're an AI company where you want to be part of shaping the future of AI in California and across the country, or you're a CEO who wants to learn more and engage, please reach out. Probably for me personally, I am having conversations about finding the right match for a corporate board, large publicly traded companies out there. That's something that for me personally, I need to look at more seriously. LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me. SVLG.org is the company website, and we're across all the major social media. If you have an interest in, again, shaping this next generation of what AI will be, reach out. We'll be glad to partner with you.
That's awesome. Listen, Ahmad, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Let me recap your songs before we go, because there will be the Ahmad Thomas playlist on Spotify. You know that, right?
Yeah, well, sure. I want to hear the recap, but I would again close, Shannon, by saying what you do here and the way you've thought about doing it. It speaks to who you are and the good vibes that you bring, but also I really appreciate that you're doing this. You have a lot going on. I do think this is a real service. So I do appreciate very much that you do this and that you had me.
No, thank you. Thank you. You'll be surprised with what little nugget you dropped on something that you think is so small that changes how somebody is thinking about what they're going through today. So I do this podcast because I feel very honored to know so many amazing leaders in my life and in my career. And I'm just trying to share this with my network. We both come from a background of service. And so it's one of those things where it's not about the accolades, it's not about any of that stuff. It's that you give back to people because much has been given to you. And it will work itself out because you will help somebody if you just keep that top of mind. Let me recap your songs real quick. First, you had Promised Land by Chuck Berry. Next, Only You by 112, followed by Funky President by James Brown, Gene and Dinah by Mighty Sparrow, Roller Skates by Steel Pulse, and any Bad Bunny song that's appropriately PG to put on the list, we have the green light to do so. Ahmad, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all you're doing. And, look, we're rooting for you. All of my listeners out there who want to get more involved with AI CEOs, you heard Ahmad, reach out. Please reach out to them. Your stuff will be in the show notes. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to No Boxes, Just Verses. And if this episode moved y'all, please share it, rate us, follow the show on your favorite platform, and we can keep building our leadership playlists together. So you can find me, guys, on Instagram as Shannon Nash 1 and No Boxes, Just Verses on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Shannon Nash ESQ CPA. You can also find No Boxes, Just Verses on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at noboxesjustverses.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes. The show notes are super important because this is where the playlists will live. You will be able to get these playlists on Apple and Spotify. You'll also be able to follow up and see how to reach out to the guests, follow them, and support them. Until next time, I need you to stay unboxed. You come for the stories, but you stay for the playlists. I'm Shannon Nash, and I'm out.
No boxes, just verses. Listen to the sound. No boxes, just verses. We not playing around. No boxes, just verses. Every voice reverse. No boxes, just verses. Unit says rehearse. No. This is Shannon Nash and I got cloud. This is Shannon Nash, the show's about. No boxes, just verses. The songs we used to play. No boxes, just verses. How we found our way. No boxes, just verses. Leading every day. No boxes, just verses. Let's all together say